Okay, today let's see about Docker networking. So, what is networking? Networking is nothing but in case if you have to communicate between different machines, we use networking. Okay, like in case if you are sending some data from one machine to the other machine, so all those things will be connected through IPs, and those IPs will be talking to each other because the host machine, each host machine will have a different IP. So, how these things communicate. For example, if we take the laptop, two laptops will have different IP addresses, and based on that IP, the data will be sent and received. So similarly, we are installing this Docker on host machine, right? So how the networking will work inside that one? So let's see that one. Okay. So So if we see here in Docker, we have four types of networks. One is bridge network, another is host network, and we have something called overlay network, and we have none network. So each one is different from each other, and each will be used in different scenarios. So let's see one by one. Okay. So first is bridge network. Okay. First is bridge network. So what this does, so this is the default one. In case if you are not mentioning any network configuration, this is the one which is by default it will be configured with our Docker. When we do Docker run, by default it will come. Otherwise, in case if you want to specifically use some other network, then we can just mention that network. Then we will be able to use them. So we have different networks we have overlay, and then we have something called host network. Okay, and then we have something called none. So what is bridge network? For example, let's consider this is your laptop. So this laptop will be working on some IP address like 192.1.1.1. Okay, and then you created a VM. So this VM will have an IP address. For example, let's consider this is having an IP address of 192.1.1.2, and then you're running container. Okay, and inside a VM we can have multiple containers. So we have three containers, and if we have to communicate to this container, for example, let's consider this as C1, this as C2, this as C3. If you have to communicate with C1, it should have a unique IP, right? Then only we will, for example, if everyone's name is Ashok, how we will differentiate between one person and the other? We will not be able to differentiate, right? So we keep each container different name. Uh, Naming is easy for human understanding, but computers will not understand those things. So we need IP addresses. So this container will have some IP address. For example, it will have something called 172.1.1.1, and this will have 172.1.1.2, and this one will have 172.1.1.3. So all have different IPs. So in bridge network, what will happen? This containers which are in VM, it will be isolated from this laptop. There will not be having any connection between laptop and VM. It will be isolated. So inside VM they will talk to each other. If C1 wants to talk to C2, it will talk. If C1 wants to talk to C3, it will talk. If C2 wants to talk to C3, it will talk. But if C1, C2, C3, if any of the containers wants to talk to this laptop IP 192.1.1.1, it will not be able to communicate. This is called bridge network. It will create a bridge. This bridge is isolated. Okay, so they will not be able to communicate. So this is the default network of Docker, and we have something called overlay. No need of seeing much about this one because this thing we use in Docker Swarm. Okay, Docker Swarm. So instead of Docker Swarm, we will be learning Kubernetes. Okay, whatever Kubernetes does, that will be done by Docker Swarm. So we use this overlay network in Kubernetes or Docker Swarm. What is this overlay network? For example, this is my laptop, okay, and we have one more laptop, and inside this laptop we have another VM, and inside this we have another containers. For example, C4, C5, C6. How this will communicate? So these are done by overlay network. Okay, so these things we will not see now. Just remember, like what is the use of this one overlay? So overlay will communicate between different VMs in different host machines. Okay, this is host one, this is host two. Okay, how communication happens between these containers, and then we have something called host. Okay, host network. We have host network. What is host network? So it is like similar to the bridge network. Here we have the IP address 192.1.1.1, and then here the containers will have the IP address of 192.1.1.2, and C2 will have 192.1.1.3, and C3 will have 192.1.1.4. So now what happens? This IP address can be accessed from this container, and this container can access this IP. So this laptop and this container will communicate to each other using this host network. Okay, and then we have something called none. Okay, for example, you have an application which processes some data, and this shouldn't be. So we have something called none network. What is this? For example, we have an application which processes the data. Okay. So, and this processing will happen on a separate machine, and it should not be accessed by any other machine. For example, it should be like more secured. For example, in case if it is to be more secured, for example, some credit card data or else some Aadhaar card or PAN card data which is more secure, and high security is involved. So those data is processed by some application, and it should not be communicating, like even the containers, one container should not be communicating to other, or it shouldn't be connecting to the host. So it should be isolated and it should work. Then what you can do, you can give hyphen hyphen none. So during the process, so that it will not be communicating with any other thing, and just it will do its task. Okay, so we can use this none in highly secured scenarios. Okay, let's see these things. So we have bridge network. As I told, this is the default one, and it is a private network on host that containers can connect by name. Okay, so what is that? So we have these containers. These containers can connect to each other. Okay, these containers can connect to each other, and it is like easy to communicate between inside these VM. Okay, like inside the VM, and overlay is for communicating between different hosts, and then host is for communicating between host and these containers. So how to use this one? Initially we have to use this command. What is the command? For all the commands in Docker, we have to start with Docker. Okay, so here it will start with Docker, and then we are talking about networks, right? Docker network, and then create, and then you can give whatever name you want, you can give. Okay, and then next is to run any of the applications. Yesterday we have seen, right? Docker run hyphen d, and then here we have to pass hyphen hyphen network, and then the network name which we have created. Okay, so that it will create with the same image. Okay, and if you see here host, in case if you want to run host network, here after hyphen hyphen network you can give host. Okay, when you give host, it will automatically take the host network and it will create, and here you have to give the image name. And overlay node, it is not required for now, we can see it later. And none, hyphen hyphen network none, here also it is like hyphen d, here you have to provide like overlay, that's it. So to list the available networks, you can use Docker network ls. Ls is nothing but Linux command, right? So Linux is so important, guys, because all the commands which we use are like almost related to network. Okay, like Linux. So if you see here, if you want to do list, it is ls, Docker network ls. And in case if you have to see IP addresses of any of the container, we can do Docker network inspect. Okay, inspect, and then you have to give the name of that container, network name, and then to remove, just docker network rm. For removing everywhere you will be using rm. Okay, okay, let's see this in practice. Okay, let's see. So actually, by default, when you check, you will be having all these networks created. Okay, these are created by me, but this none network, host, bridge, everything will be created by default. Okay, now let's try to create a new network bridge. Okay, so what is the command? Docker network create, and then we have to give the name. Okay, copy. So you can give a name. For example, Docker network create. Um, let's give it as test. Okay. So it is created. When you do Docker network ls, if you see, it is created. And then in case if you have to use this one, just you can give as hyphen network, and then you have to give this name. Okay. Now let's try to run this one. So when what we are running, docker run hyphen d, it is for detached mode, and we are passing hyphen network and network name and the name of the image. Okay, so let's run that one. Docker. So let's check first any images. Docker ps. So no images are running. So we don't have any images stopped as well. So now we use docker run hyphen d, and then we have to select the network, right? So hyphen network. Okay, and what is the network name? It is test. Okay, and then we have to give the image. Image is nginx. Okay, when we do this one, so when we again run docker ps, so it is running. Okay, and then it has given a name for itself, and then application is running. So now let's inspect this one. So when we have for example, uh, we have this container. Okay, if we want to check ip addresses, and if you want to check the details like what exactly it is running in this container, we have this command called docker inspect, and then I have given 48, right? 48 is nothing but container id. I have just given first two letters. Okay, that's it. So if you want here, if you see, it is so short, right? Even in case if you want to see the full length, when you do docker inspect 48, you will be able to see here. So actually this is like this big. It will come in hexadecimal, like almost 20 plus characters, I guess. If you see here, first these characters it will match here, 48 up to 35 till here it is there. Okay, and then you have the created date, when it is created on 5th November 2024, at what time it is giving. And then if you see all these paths, and then what is the state of this container, it is running true, passed false. And then if you see, it is the image sha, and then you'll have all the details. Okay, if you come down, see, this is the host name again, same. And then on which port we will be able to access, on port number 80. And what is the image name? Image name is nginx. And then what is the IP address of that container? This is the IP address. Okay. If you see here, this is the IP address of that container. So we get all the details, but what is the command? You have to do docker inspect ls. Okay. And then now let's try to create, okay, this test is what? This test is like bridge network. Okay, so do we have that detail as well? Where is Okay, actually that detail is not there, then that is fine, because when we do uh, Docker network ls, we get this one. And if you see here, it will be clearly mentioned which is what is that. It is bridge network. Okay, so here instead of this one, for example, Docker ps. So you have two containers. Now let me create another container. Okay, so docker run hyphen d hyphen hyphen network, and I am giving it as host. Okay, so what will happen, it will use host network. Okay, that name is already there. I will give name as a new one. If you see here now again, if you see, we have got one more. This is new one, but this one it will run on host network. So how we can identify whether it is running on host network? Because this nginx we are running, right? This nginx is a web application. Web application is like we will have web pages, right? So these web pages will be accessible here. Okay, let's log into this one and check. Okay, so for example, if you go like exec host network, correct? No, they will not be able to connect,
Okay.
because they will be connected to the uh, local machine. Here I am using Ubuntu, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Ubuntu can access that one, because
Mm-hmm.
this what happens to this one, these two will be isolated.
Okay.
uh,
Isolated using
Isolated
test.
means only those two can be able to communicate,
Okay.
because
Okay.
we have created the even here we have bridge network, right? So
Yeah.
in case even if we use this one, it will not
Mm-hmm.
work. Only it is like I will show you. These networks are nothing but, for example, if you see here, um, this one is there, right?
Yeah.
189. Okay.
Mm.
So, for example, if you are using 189, that 189 ID, it will create a
Mhm.
network. Okay. And you are
Okay.
creating container one, container two, container three.
Okay.
These three will be able to communicate. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have created one more network test. Okay,
Okay.
and then you have created container 1, container 2, container 3. These two will be able to communicate, but these two will not communicate.
Okay.
And then this is what? This is bridge network.
Okay.
And then what happens? Here I am talking about host network, right? So
Yeah.
what happens with this host network? We have this laptop, and then we are creating container 1, for
Okay.
example. So
Mm-hmm.
these two will be able to communicate.
Okay.
So this container and this host machine,
Got it.
this laptop, so these two will be able to communicate. When we
Okay.
give it as for example, this is our laptop, and we have given it as none,
Mm-hmm.
then it will not have communication with anything. Okay, just it will in case if it receives some data or it has some data, it will just process that one.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, like network groups like VPC, we are isolating
Yes,
the
yeah,
containers
same
like that.
manner. Yeah, VPC. In
Mm.
VPC, inside the VPC, we will be able to communicate. And in
Yep.
case if you want to do communication between multiple VPCs, then we have to do VPC pairing, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, in case if these two hosts has to communicate, then this overlay network will come into place here.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So here we are using this one, right? So we have used host network. Okay, and this okay, and it is port 80. So this is the default page where all these nginx configuration files will be listed. So it has something called index.html. So if we are accessing this one, for example, it is hosted on, by default it will be on port 80. So if we use this one and I am opening the browser, so if you see here, see, welcome to nginx. This is the web page. Okay, if you see here, cat index.html. So what is the content here? So this is the content. Okay. Now let's try to enter some other data inside HTML. Okay. Now, okay. So I have written this one. Okay. If you see this index.html, this is the content. So this got erased and this is the content. So let's go to this one. Now I'll refresh. See, hi, this is the test web server from Nginx. What I have did, I have just went here and changed. I am running this inside a container, right? I am writing this inside a container. If you see here, I have logged in into the container and then I went to this path and then I am just editing this one. But where I am seeing it on Ubuntu machine. I am editing in the container, but I am seeing the content in browser. This browser, where this browser is, it is in Ubuntu. So what happened? If you see here, I am editing in this container, but I am seeing it in this laptop. So it is visible here because I have connected the host network. By default, if I try to use this bridge network, it will not work. Similarly, in case if you have to use a none, most probably we will not use much. In case if you have to use it as none, instead of whatever we have given here, in this command, instead of host you can provide none, so then it will be like none and it will not be able to access from anywhere. Something called docker volumes. What is docker volume? So um, yesterday we have seen this thing, right? So we have a container C1 and then something happened like Docker engine something failed. Okay, for example, you're using it for some development work. For example, if you are a developer and you're writing some code and this container crashed, what will happen to the data in this? It will go away. And then you are creating the new container again, for example, C2 by running docker run. But it will not have this data, right? So like lose in case if you are having some production data and if you are losing like this, it will cause huge problems. So um, they have introduced something called volumes. So what will happen to this? So when you create a container, for example C1, you will attach an volume as well, for example V1. And then what happens when this container dies? But this volume will be in some place, like it will be in the docker and then when you create the container to C2, you can attach the same volume here. So whatever data was here previously, it will be available again to this container. By this way, we can continue with our work without any disruption. Let's see that one. So to create a volume, same command docker volume. In case of network, docker network create. Instead, if we are using volume, docker volume create and volume name. Okay, and then when you run docker run -d, here hyphen name, this container name, and then -v, you can give whatever name you want based on what you are given here. And then this path slash data, this data is nothing but it is inside the container. Okay, it will create a folder like this and it will do. And then we have like different types of volumes. This is named volume, so you will give a name and you will use it. And then we have something called -v, and then you will be providing the path on your local host, and then you will be giving the path on your nginx as well. And we have one more thing where you just give the path of nginx and you will leave so that it will be created. Okay, let's see. So to check the volumes, you have to use docker volume ls. Okay, I am inside the container. I am exiting it. Docker volume ls. So we have like 5 volumes now. Let's try to create a new volume. Okay, docker volume create, and we can give the same name test. Okay, so now let's do ls. So we have volume created. This is the volume. Okay, now let's try to delete the running containers. Docker ps. Okay, or else we can create new one. Okay, so here instead of this one I will give first, we can give name. Okay, let's give it as volume test, and then hyphen hyphen volume. So we can give the name first. We have created the volume, right? Name of the volume is test. We can give volume test, and then we can give the nginx name as nginx. So if you see here, docker ps. Oh, okay, actually I didn't give the destination path. Let me create again. Name as volume test 1, and then volume is test, and this test is in docker. Okay, this test is in docker, but this data where it has to be saved in nginx, inside nginx, where it has to be saved. So those things we can give it here. So for example, let's take data. So and I will create nginx. So if we do docker ps, we have volume test 1. This is the latest one. So now let's write some data inside the docker container. So let's exec docker exec hyphen it, and I am going inside this one. So it is 47 bin bash. Okay, so I am inside the container. So cd. Okay, let me do pwd. So I am in root. I am doing ls. So if I see here, I have the folder called data. Okay, this is what we created, right? If you see here, what is it? If you see here, this is the data test data slash data, right? So we are inside that one. Okay, now let's cd into data ls. So we don't have anything. Okay, let me create one. Touch file 1, file 2. Okay, now let me do ls. We have 2 files. Okay, exit. Now uh, docker ps. So we have created the files inside this one, right? So now let me delete that one. Docker stop 47. I have stopped the container. Now docker rm 47. So it is permanently deleted. Let's check once. Docker ps-a. Let's check whether we have 47. So we don't have 47. Okay. Now we have created a volume, and then that volume is test. But we don't have the container. Now let's try to create the container. Okay. Now let's try to create new container. Okay. Volume test 2, and then we are attaching which volume? We are attaching the same volume. Okay, we have created the volume test, right? But this is different container. This is different container, but volume is the same one which we have used before. Docker ps. If you see here, docker volume test 2 is there. So this is 1f. Okay, so let's exec to that one. What is this? 1f. 1f. Enter. Now let's go to data. If you see here, we have this file 1, file 2, but this is different container, right? So the data will be always available because we have created the volume. So no matter whatever container we have, and if we are working on some important data and we can't believe Docker, right? In case if Docker engine goes down, it will crash. If host goes down, it will crash, and it doesn't have any replication factors and high availability. So if it has some issues, it will go down. So if you create a volume and if you are working on that, in case of even the container goes down, again you can attach the volume using hyphen volume and test, and then you can give the path so that your data will be available. So by this way you will be able to retain the data. That is what we do here. Everything is same, just you have to know the concept here. Nothing but you are giving both the like entire path. Instead of this one, you are giving some path of your local machine, and then you are giving the path on container. Similarly this one here, instead of this host machine path, you are directly giving the container path. That's it. So Docker volume create for creating the volume. To list the list of volumes, Docker volume ls. And then similarly, before we used inspect, right? Similarly, you can do Docker volume inspect. Okay, let's see this one as well. Docker volume inspect. And then what is the volume name? It is test, right? Test. Okay, okay, I am inside that container. I am exiting. Docker volume. So if you see here, we get all the data like created when it is created, and driver it is local, and mount path where exactly it is mounted. If you see here, it is in data. So you can go inside and you can check. And what is the name of this volume? It is test. This is the mount path. So in case if you don't know where exactly this data is pointed, you can use this one. So it is inside test. Test is nothing but the name of this volume, and it is data. You can go to data and check. We can see those details here. And then in case if you have to remove this one, we can do docker volume rm, and then you can remove. Okay.